Okay, so I just got out of the new Warner Brothers DC superhero movie Blue Beetle. And shockingly to say for myself, based on my expectations, I thought this was a whole lot of fun. I really had a good time with this. So I went in, I'd seen the trailers, and I went in, and the trailers show you it's a nice kid. It's a teenager, young adult person who suddenly gets thrust upon them great power and responsibility, and they don't know if they want it. They don't know how to handle it, and they're figuring out how to use it, and some evil person wants to get it from them. And it sounds like about 10 films we've seen in the last several years, but it works. It works here. I'm not as much of a fan as the DC stuff as the Marvel movies, I should say, despite growing up with reading predominantly DC comics and watching predominantly DC movies as a kid, way back in the Never Never days, this one really works for me. I think DC tends to work better right now when they're not trying to be dark and brooding, when they're not trying to Dark Knightify everything. So the story here is Xolo Maridueña, actor, I had to look it up to pronounce it correctly, out of respect, who most people know from Cobra Kai. He's the nice kid, the nice guy in Cobra Kai. And he is an average youth whose family is a Mexican-American family in the Florida Keys, falling on hard times. This gigantic corporation, the Cord Corporation, is buying up the town and gentrifying and buying up their neighborhood, and they're in dire straits, and one thing leads to another, and this magical alien scarab, the titular Blue Beetle, attaches itself to him and turns him into a superhero. And off we go from there. Susan Sarandon is the villain here. She has been looking for this scarab for a long time in order to use it to make this corporate super soldier thing that will make money and control the world and things like that. So it's not huge stakes, and that's a big thing for me too in these superhero movies. Number one, they don't always need to be 2.5 hours. This is 2 hours and 7 minutes, but it never feels like it. They also don't all need to be about the end of the world, and thankfully this one isn't. This is really small stakes. It's a kid figuring out how to use these powers, why he was chosen to have these powers, and using those powers to save his family and community. And that's a big thing too. Now, again, as I sort of not really joked at the beginning of this, it is a story template we've seen a lot. You could say that this film is basically, what if Peter Parker was given the Iron Man I was going to say costume. What if Peter Parker was given the Iron Man suit? And you wouldn't be far off. That's really kind of how it feels if you stand back and squint. And you've got elements of Shazam in there. You know, a young kid powers thrown at him, trying to figure out what to do with it. It's a lot like the second Shazam movie where an older Caucasian actress is looking to get this power that rightfully belongs to her from our hero. And it's like a lot of things you've seen before, but that's okay because it's entertaining. It's when a movie isn't entertaining or is poorly made and is just clearly a ripoff of something else that it bothers me. There's a lot of movies that are knockoffs that I like, and I would say, Blue Beetle is not totally foreign to me. I remember the character from some of the DC comics that I bought. It might have been some of the throwback DC comics that I bought as a kid in the 80s. But and they do make reference to the other versions of Blue Beetle, the other costumes, shall we say. I'm not going to get into how and why, but I respect that they did that. I think that it was actually kind of cool that they did that. And it's just a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun. I was also put off going in about some of the CGI. I'm like, oh, great, it's another superhero who's entirely CGI. It is mostly CGI when you see Blue Beetle, but you also do see a guy in a suit sometimes, so it does actually feel like it's in the real world. Some of the action is a little too frenetic, a little too hard to follow, which is a shame because most of it isn't. The fights are really cool. The effects are really cool. The are really cool. This movie's really cool. I went to see this in IMAX, and at times it does fill the IMAX screen top to bottom, which is what you want ideally in an IMAX. Otherwise, it's just a really, really big screen, which is also, I believe, how you should watch most movies. But I would say if you like superhero movies, you should probably like Blue Beetle. It's a PG-13, so it's got some light profanity. It's got the brown word a few times. It's got some Randy references and comments. A couple things here and there that probably aren't great for little kids, but would also probably either make little kids giggle or go right over their heads. I know when I was a kid, and you could do a lot more in a PG than you could do now, I loved it when they said the brown word. It was a laugh to just say the SH word. It was almost instant hilarity in movies. The cast is uniformly really good in this. George Lopez, especially as the sort of outside the mainstream, shall we say, uncle of our hero. The entire Reyes family is great. They all come into play, again, much like the Shazam films recently. Everybody in the family serves a purpose in this film, not just comedically, but the comedic stuff really does work. This movie's got a ton of heart, which I really appreciated. It's got some strong themes of family and culture and tradition and anti-corporate and anti-imperialism, which is always funny when it's coming from one of the largest corporations in the country, if not the world. And it's just, it all works, you know? The drama works, the comedy works, the action works. Our main hero is super likable. I hope there are more of these, and I hope they continue in the vein of not being about interstellar threats and keep them relatively low-key, low-scale, and like the Ant-Man movies, maybe 2 hours or less. Every one of them doesn't need to be about the end of the world or somebody else has the power or this is the biggest threat ever. They could just be adventures, and that's okay. So in theaters now, and I will say too, completely, I'm not sure the right term because I'm slow on things, but Latinx, let's say, very much of that culture, and that's great. I saw this, literally, I just got out of the theater. I'm in the parking lot. If I swing this around, you can probably almost see the theater where I just saw this movie. The heavily Latin population where I am here, and it's fantastic because they were laughing at jokes I didn't quite get. They were laughing at cultural things that I didn't quite get, which is not to say that excludes anybody from this. It's just nice to see, and this was true of Black Panther as well. It's nice to see kids and people who never had a superhero who looked like them have a superhero who looks like them. I got no beef with that whatsoever. Just make it an entertaining movie, and Blue Beetle does. So in theaters now, see it big, see it loud. It would be a great drive-in movie too, as a matter of fact. Blue Beetle.